I would prefer African over black, black being just a color, and there is no cultural, no historical, no geographical, connotation to that. But African does associate us with a continent, with a place, with a history, with a tradition. Now, is Africa or African an appropriate word for even that continent? And that's in discussion. That's being debated. It is believed that Africa got its name from a conqueror named Africanus, that he named the continent. So if that's the case, then maybe it's not a good name there. But it will be for Africans to determine whether they want that title, that name as an ethnic label or not. But I think there are some more greater issues that we need to be taken care of before we start debating on what we're going to call ourselves. But I do believe ultimately that will be important, that will be in, seen as a sense of self-determination, you know, and to really put things back into order, back into perspective that was lost in us during the transatlantic slave trade and what our people went through in this culture, in this society, to have our minds thoroughly destroyed of all knowledge of ourselves, our past history, and etc. I find that on the African continent, many people prefer to be called by their own tribal name, their own tribal identity, instead of being recognized as some homogeneous one Africa. They have their own independent identities, and they are very, proud of that. So maybe we don't need no one size fits all, but we just find our own individual identities that represent our group and how we see things and how we view life and how we just want to be identified. I think, hey, we could do that too. That would be proper. Well, the
That makes sense.
downside of tribalism is that you are a small group, and when the bigger group wants to impose their will on you, it's a whole lot easier. That gets down to the plan and scheme of divide and conquer. But then on the other hand, where you have people that want more of a national identity, the nation state identity, and then even that grows to more of an imperial, where you kind of subdue all the tribes and nations and you bring them under one umbrella. Then you got like a whole lot of power, then a whole lot of juice. So that would be the downside of tribalism. But tribalism in and of itself is no more than, say, the larger and the extended family. Tribe would begin with the basic home environment, and then it would extend to extended family environments. And if tribes want to join on with one another for their own survival's sake, then it becomes a bigger picture, and then it just continues to grow and expand. But on each level, you don't necessarily lose your identity in it. So yes, to compete in this modern day global world, people would prefer, like Sheikh Anta Diop would say, a more federated, Africa, or the more pan-Africanist view where we do all come together. And we do as a people. It's kind of like, say, if we're going to get back to sports metaphors, you have individual teams that could be like the tribal ID, but then there is the league. There are principles and laws and policies in effect that govern the league, but then each individual team can have its own nuanced differences, its own team colors, team mascot, etc., etc. But ultimately, they all function under one umbrella, and laws are set at the highest level, so, and everyone must comply. But it still leaves room for your individualism. A mass exodus would cause some logistical difficulties, but I do believe, if not a literal or a physical repatriation, there should at least be a mental and a cultural repatriation. You know, I believe that we should learn as much as we can about the continent. I believe, as I have, should be free to travel throughout Africa. I would like a passport. I would like to be known as a citizen of Africa, where I can go and travel throughout the various African countries with an African passport or ID to be identified as an African of in that sense. So yes, I have been to Africa. I know people who have repatriated back to Africa. One of my sisters, Sister Imakus in Ghana at the Cape Coast, she wrote a book called, I forget the title, Returning to Africa Ain't Easy, but it sure is a blessing. And I would say that it is not easy. And a lot of people that do try to repatriate end up coming back here to an environment and a world that they are most familiar with. And so, but we do need some sort of connection with the motherland in one sense or another. I would like a dual citizen. I would like maybe a home in Africa that I could go to, you know. But I would like to have a strong connection with the continent. Reparations, I guess the definition of the word is to repair some damage that has been done. Was there damage done? Yes, there was, quite a bit. Do we deserve some sort of reparation? Of course we do. If the Japanese got reparations, if the Jews are still getting reparations, then I do believe that we are entitled to something. But there again is another logistical problem. You know, how do you, or would you, if, I mean, presidents don't even want to apologize or acknowledge that something terrible happened to the point that we deserve reparations, because if they did, then that would open up the door for a better case for us to get it. So they don't even want to acknowledge the fact. So, and even if they did, then the logistics of it, I mean, why our generation? Maybe the generation before us should have got it. A generation closer to slavery should have got it. If they want to issue checks, who would they issue them to? Do we have a central bank, a central government, you know, that we would entrust, that they could put trillions of dollars into? Because that's probably, I don't even think you can put a number value on what is due and owed to us. And so it's a sticky question, man. I don't know. I don't think, I mean, you got a nation that's how many $1 trillion in debt? They can't afford reparations. They can't afford to give us nothing. So, man, you know, I really, that's a difficult one for me. There's probably some folks out there more intelligent than I am who have been on this case longer than I have, and it's their specialty, and maybe that question should be directed to them, the logistics of how that would even work out. If this government and these people, they acknowledged that yes, slavery was bad, but we do reparations. Maybe they think that the social programs, welfare, reparations. Maybe they think that affirmative action was enough for reparations. You know, I don't know. That's a difficult one for me, but if somebody can make the case and get it, I would surely accept it.